morning. Good morning. I want to welcome you this morning, and we're glad you're here with us today at Elma First Baptist Church. Got a few announcements this morning. The connection card, it's, Shirley, what color is that? Purple. Yay! So, if you fill that out, whether you're visiting or whether you worship here regularly, we'd greatly appreciate that. Prayer requests, praises, oftentimes there's a place to serve if that's on your heart. If you fill that out, that would be great. And then budget reports are due tomorrow to the church office. So if you are still working on that, tomorrow's the deadline, September 18th. And today, it's my pleasure to welcome Debbie Eisenhart. And Debbie is a missionary that we support from SIM. And I just wanted to read the little blurb here in the bulletin for you. Dr. Debbie Eisenhart is a medical missionary with SIM, an organization mission organizing with more than 4,000 active missionaries serving in more than 65 countries. When in the field, she teaches basic surgical skills, and at the Mbingo Baptist Hospital in Cameroon, where African doctors are trained to become surgeons in spite of working long hours, both as a surgeon and in training new surgeons. She takes every opportunity to share God's truth and love. Dr. Debbie will be speaking about her work in Cameroon and at her home in Salem, Oregon today during the worship service. So please just welcome her. And then directly after the service, we're just going to have a small little meet, greet, and eat little luncheon over there. There'll be some lasagna and some salad, and just a chance to chat with Debbie if you didn't get a chance to this morning, and a chance for us to say goodbye and thank you for coming. This past weekend was our annual men's retreat, and it was in Central Oregon at Camp Tadmore. And men's retreats are usually about the common struggles we have as men, and we have them, trust me. The speakers typically address this subject from a wide variety of angles, and this year was no different. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to allow the men that went to the retreat this last weekend an opportunity to maybe share a moment that might have stood out to them. So if anybody would like to share.
Glad to go. Glad to be with, I think there was at some point 9 of us there together with the other 1,200 or so guys. It was a good time. Our teacher, in his closing presentation, speaking out of Samuel, talked about David and Saul and how David didn't take matters into his own hands but waited for God's will to come to fruition. And he honored Saul as king and waited in a very honorable way. His men were inclined to take matters in their own hands often, and was a warning against that. It was a good time.
For me, it was right out of the gate with a challenge. Like, not so much challenge, but like the first session is questions. What's a man or what makes a man? And it's nothing that initially pops into your head from the human standpoint. So that was pretty cool. And then just the camaraderie that everybody you know, and then being on the same page with anybody you talk to, you're all there together for the same reason, for the same mindset. So it's really awesome.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead, Justin.
I'll just speak from back here. I only got to go for part of it, but it was a good experience. I think my favorite part at any men's retreat is always just the worship time. To hear 1,200 guys singing worship songs together is amazing. I enjoyed the speaker quite as well, and then just the idea just to be around, like Seth said, just other men of the same faith, to be able to share together, to be able to just not only fellowship with our 9 guys that went, but also with all the other men that were there. It was really powerful. It was really nice. That facility there was my first time at Tadmore. Really nice camp. Probably one of the nicest camps I've ever been to, as far as just the size of it and the activities they had there. The first night they had a dodgeball tournament. we got to see some guys and kids and youth that were there as well, high school aged guys. So got to see quite a bit of action on the dodgeball court, which was pretty fun. And then Oscar and Andy aren't here, but they won the soccer tournament. So they were on the group of 4 that won the soccer tournament. So that was pretty
Big
exciting.
Big surprise.
Yeah. So it was pretty awesome, but enjoyed it.
Andy scored all the goals too. It was fun to watch. Yes, Jim.
Dave Parks and I went early on Wednesday to find a place to take my partner up there. And I appreciate the opportunity to get to know Dave better, the fellowship with him. And he went out on, he is not really good at the best, and he can. And he went out of his way to make me feel comfortable, walk over me to make sure that I was able to go from down, trying to climb up down the hills and stuff like this that we had there. And I just really appreciate that, and appreciate the fellowship that we had with the group of men that did come down. And I'm looking forward to doing it next year. And one thing too, that for the hearing impaired, I was talking to one of the gentlemen that had the big black box that had all the lights and stuff on it. And he said that he's going to bring some earphones next year for the hearing impaired. Oh, great. That'll be able to hear the speaker more clearly. So he's bringing about, he said about 25 pairs. So great. And I'm going to try to, if I can remember, I'm going to try to call him next year before the camp and remind him that, that he needs to. Thank you very much.
But so what stood out for me was Vince's example of a man in a counselor's office and the wide path of destruction to one's family, friends, and church as a result of this man's desire to follow his own will rather than God's. And he gave us several examples in the Bible, as Bob mentioned, on men who would follow their own will versus men who followed God's will, and the distinct contrast between the two. Man's will leads to destruction and death, while God's will leads to life and freedom. So it was a pretty powerful message that Vince had for us. And I just really appreciated the time together with the gentlemen that attended, and their example and desire to seek Christ. It's extremely inspiring to me, so I really appreciate that. And also, to the congregation for your continued support of the men of our church, and your prayers for us to be servant leaders as God calls us to be. So we really appreciate that too. And just one last thing, I don't need to be real long here, but I think I've shared my first impression of the men's retreat where we got into the session there, and then I thought we were going to start talking about God, and then all of a sudden these men stood up and went up and picked up their musical instruments, and I said, "Oh my gosh, we're going to sing." And today, it's one of my favorite things about men's retreat is the men that are just joining in voice. And so I think I've mentioned a couple of times about just the voice of 1,200 men singing. We got a little clip of it. I took a little video, and I just want you to hear the men's voices. But when you see the clip, just disregard the cinematography. So. That was really cool. Yeah. So let's pray. Lord, how great thou art. We just thank you and praise you for the love and the grace and the truth that you extend to each and every one of us. We just pray today for Debbie as she presents and comes and shares in our congregation. We pray that you would go before her in that. Pray that you would just be with those who are not with us today. Just a hedge of protection around them. We just ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Good morning. Let's worship.
Light of the world, you step down into darkness. Open my eyes, let me see. Beauty that made this heart. and all the love I've ever found. Comes like a flood, comes rolling down. At the cross, I surrender my life. I am all of you. I am all of you. Where your love and
may be seated.
Good morning. As Doug shared, we have a special guest here this morning to be sharing with us. And just so you know, this is something, this space and what it represents is something that I take really seriously as far as proclaiming the word and as far as making the gospel known. And whoever is here, we consider a part of that work. Yes. Anyone invited to come and speak. So I thought it was really important that Dr. Eisenhut come and share with us this morning. If you haven't heard, if you've been reading the news or have read our newsletters, there is a lot going on in Cameroon right now, and they are under a great deal of duress. And as far as their ministry and just the stability of the region, they need prayer. They need us as fellow ministers in the gospel to come alongside of them and to hear from Dr. Eisenhut and what she is doing. And as far as your church, we are on mission together, right? So we aren't just people who come in as American Christians and sit for a few minutes or an hour or so every Sunday and say, okay, we've done church. That's not it. We are God's body together, and we are representing Him here in this place and throughout the world together. And so we wanted Dr. Eisenhut to share so that we can remember that we're in this to carry each other's burdens and celebrate each other's joys. And so we're eager to hear from her. Also, you may have noticed there's not an insert there that we usually fill in, that sort of thing, but there's, from the missions board, from Carol, she put it together for us for the annual reports, but we took what was being said about the different missionaries that we support, either locally or throughout the world. We've written down what they are doing and how we can be thinking and praying about them. The life groups this week, we're going to be praying for those, and next week in the forum, again, just to be remembering that we have this work in the Lord to do, right? As our purposes at this church, to make complete disciples through Christ-centered unity, right? Through focusing on Christ and His work in our lives together. And so with that in mind, Dr. Eisenhut, please join us.
So thank you so much for inviting me to speak. I always enjoy coming here and sharing with you. The first few slides may be a little bit of review, just to show some people who might be new what I'm doing. But as you may remember, in August of 2015, I began work at an Mbingo Baptist Hospital in Cameroon. I'm a missionary. I'm training young African doctors to be surgeons. I'm a missionary with SIM, but I work with the Pan-African Academy of Christian Surgeons, and I'll refer to that as PACS. So when you hear that word, that's what that means. Cameroon is just to the right of Nigeria. Here's Nigeria. That little country right there is Cameroon in West Central Africa. It's divided into the eastern French-speaking region and the western English-speaking region. And right there at the red dot is about where Mbingo is. It's in a, are we able to turn off some lights so that can be a little bit more, they can see those slides a little bit better? Because it's kind of, needs some more contrast there. It's in a very rural area. It was started as a leprosy treatment center, but is now a 300-bed hospital run by the Cameroon Baptist Convention. This is a wing of the surgical ward, and people come from all over Cameroon to get their care. I serve as faculty surgeon with the Pan-African Academy of Christian Surgeons with a surgical training program. And PACS was started to address the critical need for surgery in Africa. It used to be thought in missions that we should just be focusing on public health and nutrition and clean water, stuff like that. But the Lancet Commission on Global Surgery in 2015 changed some of that thinking. In this map, the darker the red, the worse the access to surgery for the people. You can see that in parts of sub-Saharan Africa, close to 100% of the people lack access to surgery. There were 5 findings of the Lancet Commission, but I want you to remember that about 5 billion people in the world lack access to safe and affordable surgery and anesthesia. And the health burden of surgical care outstrips the need for tuberculosis care, malaria care, and HIV care combined. And the lack of surgical care actually inhibits the economic growth of nations. To translate this into raw numbers, 56 million people in sub-Saharan Africa need surgical care. 93% lack access to basic surgical anesthetic and obstetric care that's safe, timely, and affordable. Now, the World Health Organization recommends that there be one surgeon for 20,000 people. Well, many places in Africa have one surgeon for 250,000 people. And there are some countries like South Sudan where there's one surgeon for every 2.5 million people. Here's a comparison. New York State and Malawi have about the same number of people, about 20,000 people. New York has over 2,000 general surgeons. Malawi, 42. And so they need over 1,000 to get up to snuff, according to the World Health Organization. 10% of deaths in Africa are avoidable by surgical intervention, and 20% of deaths in kids. Only 5 to 10% of women can get a C-section if needed, and that's a pretty awful thing to think about in 2023. The PAC's mission is to glorify God by training and discipling African surgeons and related specialists to become Christ-like leaders and servants, providing excellent and compassionate care to those most in need. And PACS envisions a growing number of African surgeons and related specialists living out the gospel and ministering to the sick. So PACS is not just a surgical training program, it's a Christian discipleship program. There are PACS programs in 11 countries. There are 23 separate programs, 14 of them general surgery. 2 of them are new, but you can see that now PACS is training not just general surgeons, but orthopedic surgeons, pediatric surgeons, heart surgeons, head and neck surgeons, neurosurgeons, and OBGYN doctors. So this is really wonderful. And they're located in 17 partner hospitals throughout Africa. And there is Mbingo. I believe that's Mbingo right there, I think. Anyway, right now there are 150 young doctors in training, and 1/4 of them are women. That's one of our residents right there. These trainees represent 19 African countries. It's truly the Pan-African Academy of Christian Surgeons. And now there are over 140 graduates serving the Lord in 20 countries. Now they're required to work in a hospital where they will provide care for the poor for 5 years after graduation. Then they can do whatever they want. But 100% of them have continued to work doing this after their obligation period has ended. None of them has gone on to a position where the main goal is just to make money. As you may remember, I was unable to return to Mbingo due to a worsening of the civil war, COVID-19 restrictions, and then a worsening in mom's health. And because of the civil war, the PACS program at Mbingo was closed for over a year, and it's been since then been restored. So SIM gave me a job working in the U.S. so I could be near Mom, and Mom turned 93 in May. Part of my job is to represent SIM at local universities, and this is at a job fair at Oregon State, which is where I went to college. Here I'm talking to an engineering student at Oregon Tech in Klamath Falls, and the bleeding students are both stunned and encouraged to see that there is a booth from an evangelical mission organization there. So I have multiple interesting conversations, both with believing students and unbelieving students. And for those who are interested, I keep some materials from the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association on the table. It's a joy to attend mission conferences for SIM as well. This is Missions Fest Seattle, and I'll be doing that again this fall. I also work in the SIM booth at the annual Global Missions Health Conference in Louisville, Kentucky, where healthcare workers and students come to find out about mission opportunities in healthcare. Part of my job description is to continue my French studies. So I meet regularly with my French tutor in Salem. Georgette is from the Alsace region of France, and she's in her 80s. yet she graciously meets with me and helps to try to improve my French. I'm hoping just to keep the little French I have. Here we're having a pre-Christmas fondue party, and we talked about food, of course. And this week when we met, we said, let's have another one. So we're going to plan another fondue party. I also take classes through the Alliance Française in Portland, and I can communicate with patients, government officials, and shopkeepers on a basic level. When I was there last time, I was able to do some things in Yaoundé, the capital, completely in French, so they pretended to understand me anyway. Another project is to help write curriculum for the College of Surgeons of East, Central, and Southern Africa. We call that COSEXA, and it's used by residents in training throughout Africa. I also began working as a project manager for an SIM project that funds missionary graduates working in unreached areas. It's very difficult for African missionaries to raise support, as much of the African church is very poor, and also is sometimes not on board with giving financial support to missionaries. And this project provides us a portion of their salary for the first 5 years on the field, so they can focus on working and then raise support during that time. Now, since Mom's health has stabilized, I've been able to take multiple short-term trips. I try not to be gone more than a month for Mom. And this year I've been to Kenya, Malawi, and then twice to Mbingo. And while at Mbingo, I serve as surgical faculty. This is our morning report. Every morning we get together and talk about the patients that were admitted the day before. And then we make patient rounds. This picture was taken over 6 years ago, and I love this picture. It shows us in the men's ward talking about a patient, but all the residents pictured here have now graduated, and they're serving at different mission hospitals throughout Africa. Dr. Sam Nigo works at the hospital where he was born in Bunia, DR Congo. And at the hospital, it's in a war zone. The hospital lacks equipment, and sometimes he doesn't get his pay. He could leave now, but he stays there to work, even though he and his wife, Rose, sometimes wonder how they're going to educate their 3 little boys. Dr. Tadfor is an internal medicine specialist working at a mission hospital in Cameroon. Dr. Trezor Mabanza is working at a large, very difficult government hospital in Liberia. And then Dr. James Joseph works at a coastal hospital in Kenya, and sometimes he also does not get paid. These are very dedicated young doctors, and I just feel very privileged to have been part of their training. As I mentioned before, PACS is a discipleship program as much as it is a surgical training program. And a wonderful part of being at Mbingo is participating in the weekly Bible study. We go through the 5-year PACS spiritual curriculum, and if you're interested in what's in that, that's on the table in that green folder. You can kind of look through that and see what they're taught. But it's a discipleship program for Christian leaders, and all these young doctors will be leaders in their future hospitals, and it's a joy to be part of their training, both surgical and spiritual. And of course, I help the residents do surgery. Because of the Civil War, fewer patients have been able to get to the hospital, so the caseload is lower than usual. It makes the work easier on me, as long hours in surgery are harder at my age, and bending over a patient in surgery is not as easy. However, the residents need more cases to be adequately trained. And also the hospital needs patients to get patient revenue, to pay salaries and buy supplies and everything. So during my most recent trip, I was actually not in the OR at all. Because if I would have been there, I would have taken a case away from a senior resident or a junior faculty member. But working with the residents is lovely. Here some of them are writing their chart notes at the nurse's station in the surgical ward after morning rounds. This is Dr. Roger. Now we would say Dr. Roger, right? Okay, but he's Dr. Roger. And he's a 4th-year resident. And after his graduation, and after his 5th year, he wants to be a faculty member at Mbingo, and he will do very well if he does that. He was raised by his mother, a subsistence farmer, and with her little tiny plot of land, she somehow paid for his medical school. And he heard about PACS when someone came to talk about it at his little church, and his pastor encouraged him to apply. These young people will change their communities, and they will transform Africa with the gospel. Now, several years ago, as some of you remember, I developed a basic surgical skills course to train our newest residents in essential skills. And I've taught it multiple times at Bingo and then in several other countries. And teaching this course involves lots of shopping, making stuff, and bringing extra luggage. And so this is a typical load for me leaving Portland. This is from a course I taught in Malawi. This is a faculty member at Enkoma in northern Malawi. He's from Austria. These residents are learning to put on surgical gowns and gloves correctly. And here they're tying surgical knots. This is the faculty member, program director there in Malawi. But I found that number 10 crochet thread from Walmart works great for this. Pig skin is very much like human skin, so we use pig's feet to learn to sew lacerations, and then we use the tendons to practice tendon repair. Now, a very popular part of the course teaches laparoscopic skills. And the commercial trainers that you can buy are very expensive. They cost like $600 or $800. So we use plastic storage containers from Walmart, and then battery-powered lights and webcams that I get on Amazon. And they practice such things as threading pony beads on nails, and closing a zip tie, which is a really difficult task. In this exercise, they're transferring perler beads from one sauce cup to the other. And here, a resident is learning to examine intestine inside the abdomen, and by using a shoelace. And the resident has to go from one end of the shoelace to the other, but touch only the red parts. In this exercise, the resident has to open a matchbox, take out the matches, and then put them back inside and close the matchbox. But this young resident from Ethiopia in the Malamula program decided to excel. You can't see that very well, but he spelled out Malamulu on the floor of his trainer. So I think he'll go far, don't you think? So another session is devoted to ultrasound, and each resident gets a chance to examine a patient or a model for internal bleeding, shock, and blood clots in the leg. They also practice ultrasound-guided biopsies using a bin of cooked oatmeal in which I've embedded small potatoes. And finally, they spend one session learning how to sew up intestine using pig intestine. This last year, I developed an optional workshop for all the residents, not just the beginning ones, learning how to sew blood vessels together. Now, we don't do much vascular surgery in Africa, but the residents need to know how to fix injuries when they come in. So here I'm making some models to simulate working in a confined space, like behind the knee. And you can see the completed models behind me. And we use the long, skinny balloons that you make balloon animals out of. In the first exercise, they have to cut them in two and then sew them end to end. And so this is one guy's first effort, and I think it's a pretty good effort. In the next exercise, they have to sew them end to side, and like you would do in a blood vessel bypass. And here's Dr. Faith. You can see she's working on her third end to side anastomosis. Now, she doesn't have really bad acne. The package of the balloons comes with little ice stickers that you put on the balloon animals when they're finished. And so I said, well, every time you do an anastomosis, you can have an ice sticker. So they stuck them all over their faces. When they had succeeded at that, then they would do the same thing inside this model that simulates working in a confined space, like I said, behind the knee. And it makes it more challenging, but it's like what you would do in real life. I also provide breakfast and lunch during these sessions. Actually, you guys do. I think it's important to feed people, and I think Jesus did a lot of his teaching with his disciples over meals. Now, one stress of working at Mbingo has been the lack of good anesthesia. Patients often have serious complications during and after the surgery. There have been many unnecessary deaths. But 2 anesthesiologists started working here, one from Australia and one from Cameroon. And the quality of anesthesia has greatly improved. But as part of improving the situation, I was asked to provide some teaching on advanced cardiac life support. That's giving CPR along with drugs to help sick patients. And that was my focus for this most recent visit to Mbingo, where I spent a month. And here I am preparing for the course. I wanted the training to be as realistic as possible, so I made defibrillator models. They're just toys. And also one for giving IV drugs. And here, if you push on this left button, it says, stand clear, it's my voice, analyzing rhythm, beep, 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 beep. And if you push this one, it says, stand clear, giving shock, beep. So Because one of my intentions was that the young doctors be able to teach this curriculum at their future hospitals, I made a homemade airway mannequin and brought it to Cameroon. This is made out of a foam wig stand. And most rural hospitals in Africa don't have an airway mannequin, so I wanted to show you can make something that would work using very basic materials. The classes were well attended and well received. On this trip, we trained about 120 people at the hospital. They had to run life support scenarios using the advanced cardiac life support algorithms given by the American Heart Association. And here you can see 3 members of the team doing CPR, and the others are timing the interventions with their cell phones and getting ready to give drugs and work the defibrillator. Having the models made it very realistic for them. Here you can see a team standing clear, analyzing the rhythm there. And here a member of a team is giving epinephrine to the patient. These are the drugs they use. It's just colored water in the old medication vials. Their final exam was to run at least 2 unknown scenarios, and all the groups are so excited, most of them ran at least 4. Here one team is trying to determine what the final rhythm is to see if their patient lived or died. This is Dr. David Sunday, our critical care specialist, and several faculty members helped teach the course, and they did a great job. So my hope is they can continue giving the course even in my absence. This is a video of the participants as they were running their final exam scenarios. There are 6 groups, and I just went through the room and just took some video of what they were doing here. She just defibrillated the patient.
One cc and load around served.
So you can see how engaged and serious they are. And this group just turned over their final scenario last page and realized their patient lived. So, and after the main course, they all got to practice putting in different kinds of airways. Each month I host a dinner for all the PACS faculty, residents, and their families, and this promotes fellowship among the PACS community. There are here are two of our residents and our ophthalmologist are enjoying the dinner, and I don't know whose kid that is. They pass kids around like candy. Here's a resident and a faculty member with their families. A highlight for the kids is I always bring my toy collection, and this little boy, dressed in his Sunday best, always goes for the same locomotive every month. So you, my faithful supporters, help fund this important occasion. And it's a joy to spend time with these young doctors and their families. Their Christian testimonies are inspiring, and many come from backgrounds of hardship. They will make disciples for Jesus in their culture. And it's so easy to focus on the discouragements and the obstacles. I can't always see the results, but I know that God is always working. The gospel is the power of God, and it transforms people and cultures. Also remember that Jesus focused on only 12 people, and 3 really. And those guys changed the world. Dr. Sam is now our program director. Dr. Chokameka is one of our surgical faculty members, and they're impacting lives for Jesus in Africa. Now, if you've been reading my prayer letters, you know that there are multiple infrastructure projects ongoing at Mbingo. This is the radiation machine that will be installed in a new radiation bunker that's under construction. When it's completed, patients will come from all over Central Africa because it's the only place. Mbingo is applying for a USAID grant to finish the whole project, which will include 3 hostels because patients have to stay 6 or 8 weeks for their program, and there's no other place to stay. We now have a functioning, high-quality hydroelectric project that provides electricity and water. This is the turbine. This is Dr. Mark Snell, and you may remember that he had to return to the U.S. for medical treatment. He can't return to the field. A new oxygen plant has been completed, but because the compound is not properly wired, we can't use it yet. This is Dr. Sama. She's our new program director. She graduated just in 2017. Our only faculty are now young, recent graduates, so please pray for them and pray for more seasoned, long, and short-term faculty to come. Our PACS residents find it difficult to educate their kids. The local school has reopened. It was closed for several years because of the troubles, but the education is not very good. I've been helping some families to homeschool with supplies and books to homeschool their kids. Sadly, this trip was marred by an escalation of the Civil War. The road to Mbingo was closed to all traffic except the Cameroon Baptist Convention vehicles. When I arrived, we raced through that part of the road as part of a convoy involving an ambulance. But unfortunately, the ambulance got a flat tire from a shell casing on the road. And so everyone hurried to change the tire on the ambulance. You can see the patient in there. It was getting close to getting dark, and after dark, the separatists just shoot at anything that moves, so we wanted to get going. There was sporadic fighting during my month there, and a group of short-termers came like the week after I got there, and as they went up the same section of the road, along the road they saw at least 7 bodies, dead bodies lying on the road. Cameroonian soldiers were often on the compound patrolling. Here's one. Here's a close-up of that soldier. Unfortunately, their presence made us targets of the separatists. And the morning of June 30th, I suddenly heard the loudest firecrackers that I'd ever heard. And it turned out to be a firefight in which 2 soldiers were killed. And I went and sat on the bathroom floor and spent the whole morning there. Our administrator sent out a WhatsApp message, just everyone stay in your house. By afternoon, things were back to normal. But I've been saying the firefight occurred fewer than 100 yards from my apartment. But we looked at Google Earth last night, and it's like it was 30 yards. So it was very loud. The week before I left, 2 men came to fix my freezer, finally. But just after this picture was taken, there was another firefight close by, and we all got on the floor. Several other days, I heard more gun battles and took shelter again. People are really suffering. They talk a lot about the crisis. One of our residents said she's terrified when this goes on. They have trouble getting food. I had been planning to return this end of this month, but after talking to missionaries and SIM security, the plan is not to right now. The road is still closed, by the way. So I'm going to go down to headquarters the end of this month and have a home assignment debrief, and I'm going to be visiting my supporters and speaking in the churches that support me and things like that. But meanwhile, pray for Mbingo and the people there. How can you be involved in reaching others? What should you be doing? Well, we all have our marching orders from Jesus. All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I commanded you. And lo, I'm with you always to the end of the age. Charles Swindoll said that whatever we do, we must not treat the Great Commission like it's the Great Suggestion. We all need to be senders or goers or both. So what are you doing? One of the most effective things we can do is pray. Jesus said, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Therefore, beseech the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest. And that's Matthew 9:38. And SIM has a prayer initiative called 938, and you can set your device at 9:38 every morning to remember to pray. Pray that prayer that Jesus asked us to pray. I like to see that doctors, nurses, pastors, and teachers are a dime a dozen on the mission field, but people who can do IT, finances, administration, human resources, or who can fix things are like gold. Now that's said tongue-in-cheek. We need everybody. All skill sets are necessary, but don't discount how important these skills are. Retirement is not a biblical concept. We should redeploy. Mark and Yvonne Snell, of course, had to return to the field. He was our program director, and he had lots of other responsibilities, including all the infrastructure projects going on. So we desperately need people to take his place. So if you know how to fix or build or do things like that, we can use you, or any mission station could do that. I have lots of prayer requests, but rather than read them, take time reading them, we should answer questions. But these prayer requests are printed up at on the prayer table, so pick one up and pray for them. So that's all I have right now. I think it's be some time to answer questions, and if we want to, we can continue question time during lunch as well, if you like. So, okay. I'm from near Salem, Oregon, and that's my sending church, the church I still attend, is the church I was born into. So I think that's really cool.
Who takes care of your mother when you have to be away?
My older brother, who lives next door to me, takes care of her. She is independent in her own home, but I'm over there a lot. I was over there, before Friday night because I want to say goodbye to her and check on her and do some last minute things for her. And when I leave here, I'll drive there and see how she's doing. But she still drives to church, which is 2.5 miles away, for Bible study Thursday afternoon. But she's now letting me drive Sunday mornings. But a lady in our church is picking her up this morning to take her to church. And then I do all the other driving and take her places and do her things. But my older brother helps with those things when I'm gone. He has his own health problems, though, so that's been an issue. Yes?
When you have your classes, do you speak French, and the people in that area speak French, but the people that come, the doctors that come for the training, are from all over Africa. So how do you communicate during your classes?
Actually, we are in the English-speaking portion of Cameroon. Okay, so the trade language is English. Everyone has their tribal language. All PACS instruction is in English. And the main reason for that is most of the faculty are English, and then most of the medical literature is in English. So people need proficiency in English to be a PACS resident. And I remember Sammy Nigo, who's now in DRC, I showed his picture early. He had to take a year of English before he could start his residency program. So, but about 75% of our patients come from the French part of Cameroon, and so we need to be able to communicate with them. And then we have to travel through the French part of Cameroon to get back and forth to Bingo. So it's important just to honor the people and to communicate, and then for safety reasons, it's important to know some French. So, yes.
What's the dollar amount we need to take in yearly to maintain standing green for your mission? So that you can do your job, without hiccups.
You mean like the hospital? You mean?
Well, like how much money does it take to fund what you do on a yearly basis for
Yeah. I don't know. I know what my support is, that kind of stuff. But I don't know how much the hospital needs to do its job. I know that they were a month behind in salaries in August. They were paying July salaries at the end of August. I know that it takes $25,000 a year to train a PACS resident, and that most of that goes to their stipend so they can live. They've got children. They have to have housing. They have to have food and transportation and stuff like that. But I don't know what the hospital budget is. I just work there. I'm not in charge of any of that.
I was just looking at all the stuff that you buy at Walmart and stuff like that. I was thinking, well, that's a lot of material that you have to spend money on.
You guys fund that. I pay for all of that out of my ministry account. I could ask Bingo for support, but that would be taking money out of Bingo. And you guys fund all that. My plane tickets, all the materials that I buy, all those things, you guys fund that. So even the homeschool books, they're allowing me to take a special part of the salary to set aside for that. So yes. Mm-hmm.
Do they have a public school there? What is their
How do they learn English?
There was, I think it was a government high school down below the hospital, but that's been closed for years now because of the fighting. The grade school belongs to the Cameroon Baptist Convention, but the education there is not very good. The teachers aren't well trained. There are at least 60 kids per class, and it's really a problem. They think it's normal that a kid not learn to read until they're 4th, 5th, 6th grade. So anyway, yes.
Debbie, looking back on your life, when was your earliest desire indication that you were going to go into missionary work? Was it missionaries that visited your church, or when did you start to get that desire, and how did you know that the Lord was leading you in that direction?
Okay. The church that I attend, and my sending church, has always sent out missionaries. For a small church, not that much bigger than Elma, we sent out an amazing number of missionaries over the years from the church body. And so we always had missionaries during Vacation Bible School and children's church and Sunday school, and they would come to church. And my parents supported a missionary family, a very small amount monthly for years, the whole career, and so it was held very high regard that missions was, and it still is. And so I always thought this would be great to be a missionary. But in 9th grade, when I decided I wanted to be a doctor, I said I want to be a missionary doctor. And so anyway, that was not a child thing. That was a God thing, I think. But when I finished my residency, I was in debt. I also had a lot of questions about my faith. I got the Bible, actually. And so I got involved in Bible Study Fellowship. The questions I had were regarding science, evolution, stuff like that. So I got involved in that study very deeply. And through the years, served the Lord in short-term missions and in my church, worked in my church. And God, about 2004, 2005, began to say, hey, it's time to go full-time. So that's a little thumbnail. So. Yes.
How did you get into? Okay, you're now a missionary. Was that your part of your plan as you were going to school, or did that develop over time?
I didn't know, and I didn't have any preconceived notion about what I should do. I just knew that God wanted me in medical missions, and so it was a lot of prayer and consultation and everything. I initially got sent me to Pakistan, and then changed missions, and I feel convinced God wanted me there. I'd say I couldn't do what I did in Liberia without that experience in Pakistan. God used that. And then sent me to Liberia. He wanted me there. I was not able to stay there because of issues there. SIM is now actually addressing some of those issues finally. But it was all good preparation for what I'm doing now. Even now, this transition time, working with SIM, helping Mom, I value that time. God is working and training me and using me. And I don't know what the future holds. September 8th, I turned 66 and a half, which is full retirement age. Though I don't plan to retire, I don't feel called to retire. I don't feel called away from bingo. But what does the future hold? And that's one of the things I'll be talking with SIM about when I'm down there. What do I do? How long can I do surgery physically? All those things. So, yes.
Where did the majority of your residents attend medical school?
There are in Cameroon. First of all, because of the war, they now only take Cameroonian doctors. Okay, so before they took from all over Africa, but when the war came, they had to evacuate these people. It was a real difficult time. Where can we get them to train? They had to farm them out to other programs. So the decision was made because of the instability to just take Cameroonian doctors. So these are doctors. They're not medical students, they're doctors, and they have graduated from 1 or 2 medical schools in Cameroon. Most of them from a place called Buea, down south of us. There's also a medical school in the capital city. So most of us have gone to one of those 2 medical schools. Actually, one of them, one of our newest ones, went to a medical school in DRC, so in Congo. So anyway. Well, okay.
Okay, I'm going to close in prayer. Then we're going to worship a little bit more and then head over for some lunch. So, good news. Let's pray. Lord, thanks so much for Debbie coming and sharing with us, and pray that you bless her and her work. Continue to raise up surgeons who are focused on you. And as they're caring for people in your name, Lord, may you draw hearts to you, even as you are restoring physical lives. Lord, we just ask for a great harvest to continue in Africa and for workers to continue to go out. Lord, we pray also that you prepare our hearts. Help us to know there is always things to be done. Lord, you are always working, and we just ask that you would help us to know the part that you would have us play as far as supporting or going or doing both. As Dr. Eisenhut shared, Lord, we just pray that you would go before us and you would be glorified. Again, thank you so much for this time to be able to focus on what it means to live for you. We pray these